I'm 67 years old, and it took me 6 decades to understand something that changed my entire life. I was standing in the pharmacy line last Thursday, just a regular afternoon. The woman behind me, someone I see maybe twice a month, touched my shoulder and asked with that concerned voice, "How are you doing, dear? Really, how are you?" And I did what I always do. I smiled, I opened my mouth, and I started talking. I told her about my daughter's divorce, about my grandson's struggles in school, about the pain in my knee that keeps me awake at night, about how lonely I feel since my husband passed. She nodded. She made those little sounds. Mm-hmm. Oh no, that's terrible. 10 minutes later, I walked out of that pharmacy, and I felt empty, like someone had reached inside my chest and scooped something out. That night I couldn't sleep, and I did something I hadn't done in months. I opened the old book my grandmother left me, Torah commentary, pages worn from her fingers, and there it was. A teaching I had read 100 times but never understood until that exact moment. If you feel drained after simple conversations, if you sense people feeding on your pain while pretending to care, if you've noticed that your private struggles somehow become public knowledge, this ancient teaching was written for you. And before we go further, if this channel is helping you see what you couldn't see before, please subscribe, because what I'm about to share goes deeper than anything you'll find in modern psychology. This is wisdom that's protected Jewish families for 3,000 years, and I need you with me for what comes next. Let me be direct with you. You are being robbed, daily, by people who look kind, who ask gentle questions, who seem to care. And the worst part? You're handing them the knife. Every time someone asks, "How are you?" and you answer honestly, you're doing something the ancient rabbis warned against with absolute clarity. You're opening a door in your soul that should stay closed. You're inviting spiritual attack while thinking you're just being polite. The Talmud doesn't dance around this. There's a teaching, plain as day. Guard your words like you guard your life, because they are the same thing, not similar, the same. When you speak your struggles to the wrong ears, you're not just sharing information, you're transferring power. You're creating openings for forces that feed on human pain. The rabbis called this dibur, lavatala, wasteful speech. But it's worse than wasteful, it's dangerous. I learned this from Rabbi Goldstein, my teacher for the past 3 years. An old man, maybe 85, who studies 16 hours a day in a small room filled with books. He doesn't have a YouTube channel. He doesn't write bestsellers, he just knows. When I told him about that feeling in the pharmacy, he didn't even look surprised. "You felt empty because you became empty," he said. "Every word you spoke to that woman was a piece of your neshama, your soul, leaving your body, and she took it, maybe without even knowing, maybe very much knowing." I started to defend myself. "But Rabbi," she asked. "I was just being kind." He held up his hand. "Kind to whom? To her, or to the dark forces that feed through her?" That sentence stopped my breath. He continued, "The Torah teaches us that there are people who are like broken vessels. They cannot hold blessing, so they seek to drain it from others. They ask about your pain, not to help but to feed, and you in your beautiful generous heart keep filling them." I sat there in silence, because I knew he was right. I thought about my neighbor, the one who always asks about my health with such concern, and then I hear my symptoms being discussed at the community center. I thought about my cousin who calls every week to check in, and then distances herself the moment I actually need help. I thought about the woman at church who collects everyone's struggles like stamps in a book. They weren't caring, they were feeding. The rabbi pulled out a commentary written in 1342 by Rabbi Menachem ben Solomon. He read aloud, "There are those who ask of your welfare not to aid you, but to map your weakness. They smile as they drink from your cup of sorrow. These are the ones our sages warn us about, those who practice ona'at devarim, oppression through words." "But how do I know?" I asked. "How do I know who's real and who's feeding?" I nodded. "You already know," he said, quietly. "You feel it. That emptiness after talking to them, that exhaustion, that sense that something was taken. Your body is wiser than your mind. It's trying to protect you, but your training in politeness keeps overriding it. Let me tell you about Ruth. She was 63 when I met her at Rabbi Goldstein's study group. Beautiful woman, warm smile, but there was something dimmed about her, like a light that used to be bright, but now just flickered. She told us her story, and I swear I saw myself in every word. For 15 years, she had a best friend named Linda. They met for lunch every Tuesday, and every Tuesday, Linda would ask the same question. So what's really going on with you? Ruth would talk about her marriage struggles, her fears about money, her daughter's addiction, her own health scares. Linda listened with such attention, such care. She'd hold Ruth's hand. She'd say, "You can tell me anything." And Ruth did. Until one day, Ruth's husband came home angry. He'd been at a work dinner where Linda's husband was present, and somehow everyone at that table knew intimate details about Ruth's marriage, details she'd only ever told Linda. When Ruth confronted her, Linda cried. She apologized. She said she'd only mentioned it because she was worried and needed advice on how to help. But the damage was done. Ruth's private pain had become office gossip. Her husband's trust was broken, and Ruth herself felt violated, used, emptied. I gave her my whole heart, Ruth told us, tears running down her face, and she sold it for interesting conversation at dinner parties. The rabbi let her cry. Then he said something I'll never forget. "She didn't sell your heart, daughter. You gave it away to someone who was never meant to hold it. The Torah teaches us, do not put your trust in a friend. Guard the doors of your mouth from her who lies in your bosom. This is not cruelty. This is survival." I went home that night and I counted. How many times that week had I answered, "How are you?" with actual truth? 17 times. To the mail carrier, to the woman at the grocery store, to my son's ex-wife, to people whose names I barely knew, to people who asked but never actually wanted to know. 17 times I had opened my soul and poured out pieces of my life to people who had done nothing to earn that trust. 17 times I had felt that familiar emptiness afterward and told myself I was just tired. The ancient rabbis knew something we've forgotten. They understood that human interaction is not neutral. Every conversation is an exchange of energy, of essence, of power. And when you give your truth to someone who hasn't earned it, who doesn't treasure it, who uses it for their own feeding, you create a spiritual wound. The Zohar, the foundational text of Kabbalah, describes this as Keli Shavur, a broken vessel. When you keep pouring your soul into people who cannot contain blessing, you yourself become the broken vessel. You leak, you drain, you empty. And the terrifying part, once you create this pattern, once you train yourself to open indiscriminately, you begin to attract the feeders. They can sense it, like sharks sensing blood in water. They find you in parking lots, at family gatherings, in line at the post office, and they ask with such care, such concern, "How are you, really?" And you, beautiful, generous soul that you are, you tell them. The rabbi taught me that there's a specific type of person the ancient texts warn about. They called them ayin ra'ah, literally the evil eye. Not evil in the sense of demonic, but evil in the sense of taking, consuming, depleting. These are people who cannot be happy for you, who ask about your joy only to diminish it, who collect your suffering not to ease it, but to feel better about their own lives, who smile while they drain you. And here's what makes it so dangerous. They often look like the kindest people you know. They're the ones who always remember to ask, who seem so attentive, who never forget a detail. Because they're not asking from love, they're asking from hunger. I know this sounds harsh. I know it goes against everything we're taught about being open, vulnerable, authentic. But let me ask you something. When Jesus taught his disciples, what did he tell them? Do not give what is holy to dogs, and do not throw your pearls before swine. When Solomon, the wisest king, compiled his Proverbs, what did he warn? Whoever guards his mouth preserves his life. He who opens wide his lips comes to ruin. When the ancient sages studied the nature of speech, what did they conclude? Death and life are in the power of the tongue. This isn't New Age philosophy. This isn't pop psychology. This is ancient truth, written by people who understood the spiritual mechanics of human interaction in ways we've completely lost. Your words carry your life force. Your struggles, when spoken, transfer power to the listener. Your pain, when shared with the wrong person, becomes a weapon they can use against you. And you've been doing this for decades thinking it was kindness. I'm not saying never share. I'm not saying build walls and trust no one. I'm saying learn the difference between holy ground and common soil. Learn to recognize who is a vessel that can hold your truth and who is a broken cistern that will only spill it out. Because right now, as you're reading this, you're probably doing exactly what I was doing. You're answering questions you should deflect. You're sharing details that should stay private. You're opening your soul to people who are either feeding on you or preparing to. And every single time you do it, you feel that emptiness, that exhaustion, that sense that something was taken. Your intuition is right. Something was taken. The question is, are you ready to stop giving it away? Rabbi Goldstein spent the next 3 months teaching me something that should be taught to every person the moment they learn to speak. He called it Shmirat HaPeh, guarding the mouth. But it's not about lying. It's not about being fake or cold or unkind. It's about understanding that your life is sacred territory and not everyone deserves a tour. Think of it this way, he said one afternoon, his old fingers tracing words in a text from the 1100s. When the temple stood in Jerusalem, there were courts. The outer court, where anyone could enter. The inner court, where only certain people could go. And the Holy of Holies, where only the high priest could enter. And only once a year. He looked up at me. Your soul has the same structure. There are parts of your life that are public. Your smile, your greeting, your kindness. There are parts that are for trusted friends who have proven themselves. And there are parts that are only for God, and perhaps 1 or 2 souls who have earned access through years of faithfulness. But Rabbi, I said, how do I know the difference? How do I know who deserves access? He smiled. The same. Where you know which food is spoiled, you pay attention to how you feel after consuming it. He taught me to watch for specific patterns, not complicated psychological theories, simple, observable behaviors that reveal who is safe and who is feeding. The first pattern, they ask about your problems but disappear when you actually need help. They want the information, not the intimacy. They want to know your struggle, not carry it with you. I thought immediately of my sister-in-law. 20 years of phone calls asking about my challenges. 20 years of, oh, that's so hard for you. But when I actually needed someone to drive me to the hospital last year, she was too busy. When I needed help after my surgery, she had so much going on. She wanted to know my pain. She didn't want to touch it. The second pattern, your private information somehow becomes public knowledge. You tell them something in confidence, and weeks later, you discover others know details you never shared with anyone. Else, this one is obvious, but we make excuses for it. Oh, she must have misunderstood. Maybe I told someone else and forgot. No, you told one person. That person fed others. The third pattern, they ask questions that feel like interrogation disguised as care. So what did the doctor really say? What did your son actually mean by that? Are you sure you're handling this well? They're not asking to help. They're asking to map your weakness, to find the cracks where they can insert themselves later. The fourth pattern, you feel exhausted and exposed after talking to them, but energized and protected after talking to real friends. Your body knows. Your soul knows. The depletion you feel isn't in your imagination. It's real spiritual drainage. The rabbi pulled out his worn copy of the Talmud and read, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai taught, I have seen people of elevated spirit, and they are few. If there are 1,000, my son and I are among them. If there are 100, my son and I are among them. If there are 2, they are my son and I. He looked at me seriously. Do you understand what he's teaching? Even among spiritual people, the truly trustworthy are rare, vanishingly rare. Yet you open your mouth to hundreds. Let me tell you about Margaret. She came to one of Rabbi Goldstein's evening classes about 8 months ago. She was 71, and she looked like she'd been crying for years. Her story was simple and devastating. She had worked as a secretary at a law firm for 30 years. There was another woman there, Patricia, who she considered her closest friend. They had lunch together almost every day for 2 decades. Margaret shared everything with Patricia, her marriage troubles, her adult son's alcoholism, her fears about retirement, her frustration with her body aging, her secret dream of writing a book someday. Patricia listened, always listened, with such patience, such attention, until Margaret announced she was retiring with a small pension and planned to spend her first year finally writing that book she'd always talked about. 3 weeks later, the firm hired Patricia's daughter to replace Margaret, at a significantly higher salary than Margaret had ever earned. But that wasn't the worst part. At Margaret's retirement party, Patricia stood up to give a speech, and in front of the entire office, she told funny stories about Margaret's struggles. her marriage problems framed as comedy, her son's addiction presented as Margaret's dramatic family life, her dream of writing mocked as Margaret's little fantasy project she's been talking about for years. The room laughed, because Patricia made it funny, made Margaret's vulnerable confessions into entertainment. Margaret left that party and didn't speak for 3 days. When she finally came to see Rabbi Goldstein, she could barely get the words out. "I gave her 20 years of my heart," she whispered, "and she turned it into a comedy routine." The rabbi was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "She turned it into comedy because that's all she could hold. She's a broken vessel. You kept pouring sacred wine into her, and it ran out onto the ground where it turned to vinegar. The wine wasn't bad. The vessel was." He taught Margaret something I want you to hear very carefully. When someone betrays your confidence, yes, they are wrong. Yes, they have sinned against you. But you also have a responsibility. You handed something precious to someone who was never meant to carry it. The Torah doesn't teach us to be naive. It doesn't celebrate the person who trusts everyone equally. It celebrates wisdom, discernment, the ability to distinguish between the trustworthy and the treacherous. "See," the rabbi said, "there's a difference between being loving and being foolish. Love doesn't mean opening your diary to strangers. It means protecting what is holy and sharing it only with those who will treasure it." Margaret started practicing what the rabbi taught her, and within 6 months her whole life changed. She stopped answering invasive questions. When people asked, "How are you really?" she started saying, "I'm blessed. How are you?" When they pushed for details, she smiled and said, "Each day is a gift. I try not to waste it worrying." At first people were confused. Some were even offended. "You used to be so open," they said, as if openness was a virtue regardless of context. But here's what happened. The feeders lost interest. They stopped calling, stopped asking, because she wasn't feeding them anymore. And the real friends? They didn't need the details. They stayed close. They showed up. They proved themselves through action, not through extraction of information. You know what's interesting? Since starting this teaching, I've received hundreds of messages from people who felt that same emptiness, that same drainage, and never had words for it until now. If you need prayer, real prayer, the kind that doesn't require you to explain your whole story, just type your first name in the comments. I pray for every name I see, and if this teaching is protecting you the way it protected me, please subscribe, because what comes next is the practical method, the actual words you can use starting today. Rabbi Goldstein gave me 5 responses, not complicated, not rude, just protected. The first response when someone asks how you are, thank God for each day. That's it. It acknowledges the question. It expresses gratitude. It gives them nothing to feed on. The second response when they push for details, I choose to focus on blessings. Notice, it's not a lie. It's a boundary. You're not saying you have no struggles. You're saying you're not discussing them here now with this person. The third response, when they act offended that you won't open up, I'm learning to guard my peace. This one is powerful because it makes the boundary about you, not about them. You're not saying they're untrustworthy. You're saying you're protecting something sacred. The fourth response, when they try to extract information through comparison, everyone's path is different. Someone says, well, I've been so stressed about my daughter. What about yours? This response closes the door without slamming it. The fifth response for family or people you can't avoid, I'm taking things one day at a time. It sounds like sharing. It gives them absolutely nothing. These aren't tricks. They're not manipulation. They're boundaries, disguised as pleasantries. And they work because most feeders aren't looking for truth. They're looking for openings. When there's no opening, they move on. The rabbi taught me to practice these responses until they became automatic. Right now, he said, your default setting is to spill. We need to change your default to protect. It took me about 3 weeks. 3 weeks of catching myself before I overshared. 3 weeks of feeling rude and then reminding myself that guarding my peace isn't rudeness. It's obedience to Torah. And then something miraculous happened. I stopped feeling drained. Conversations that used to leave me exhausted started feeling normal, light, because I wasn't giving away pieces of my soul every time someone asked a question. But here's the part that surprised me most. Once I stopped feeding the feeders, I started recognizing who the real people in my life were. The ones who didn't need my struggles to feel connected to me. The ones who showed love through action, not through extraction of information. Those people, they're rare. Just like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai taught, if you have 2 real friends in your entire life, you are blessed beyond measure. The problem is that we've been trained to confuse quantity with quality. We think having 100 people who care enough to ask means we're loved, but it doesn't. It means we're being fed upon by 100 broken vessels who cannot hold blessing. The Talmud teaches, who is rich? One who is satisfied with his portion. That includes relationships. If you have one person who would carry your burden without being asked, you are richer than someone with 1,000 people who ask about your burden but never lift it. Now let me give you the part that changes everything. Because knowing the problem and even knowing the responses isn't enough. If you've spent decades pouring yourself out to the wrong people, you need a process of recovery. You need to call back what was taken. Rabbi Goldstein taught me a practice he learned from his teacher, who learned it from his teacher, going back generations. It's based on a concept in Kabbalah called birur, the process of elevating and reclaiming what was scattered. When you speak your truth to someone unworthy, you don't just give them information. You give them pieces of your light, your energy, your divine spark. And those pieces don't just disappear. They remain attached to you, but scattered, diluted, wasted in places they were. Never meant to go. The recovery practice is simple, but it requires commitment. 30 days. Not because 30 is arbitrary, but because the sages taught that it takes 30 days to break a pattern in the soul. Here's how it works. For the first 10 days, you practice complete restraint. When anyone asks how you are, you use only the protected responses I gave you. No exceptions, even with family, even with people you think you can trust. This isn't permanent. It's reset. You're teaching your mouth that it doesn't have to answer every question with complete truth. During these 10 days before you sleep each night, you speak a simple prayer. Not fancy, not long, just this. Creator of the universe, I return to myself all that I have given away in error. I call back my light from places it was never meant to go. I close every opening I created through careless speech. The second 10 days, you begin identifying who in your life has proven trustworthy through action, not just through asking questions. Make a mental list. These are the people who have shown up, who have helped without needing your whole story, who have protected your name when you weren't there to protect it yourself. These are your real friends. There won't be many. If you have 3, you're wealthy beyond measure. During these 10 days, you practice a different prayer at night. Creator of the universe, help me see clearly. Show me who is safe and who is feeding. Give me the strength to honor the difference. The third 10 days, you start to rebuild. You can begin sharing with your proven people, but not everything. Not yet. You share slowly. You watch how they handle what you give them. You notice whether it stays private, whether they use it to help you or to entertain others. And every night you speak this prayer. Creator of the universe, teach me the difference between intimacy and invasion. Help me build gates where I had only open doors. By the end of 30 days, something changes. You'll notice it. You'll feel lighter, less drained, and the feeders, they'll have already moved on to easier targets. But I need to be honest with you about the cost. When you stop feeding people who were using you for emotional entertainment, they get offended. They'll say you've changed, you've become cold, you're not yourself anymore. Let them say it, because the truth is, you have changed. You've become someone who guards her peace, someone who understands that your life is not public property, someone who has learned the ancient wisdom that the Torah has been trying to teach for 3,000 years. Some people will leave your life during these 30 days. Good. They were never there for you anyway. They were there for what you were giving them. Let me tell you about Dorothy. She's 69 now. Came to Rabbi Goldstein about a year ago, completely broken. She had been the caring one in her church community for 40 years, the one everyone came to with their problems, the one who always had time to listen, the one who knew everyone's business because they all told her everything. But here's what she realized. She knew everyone's struggles, but when her husband died, when she needed support, the church was silent. A few cards, some casseroles in the first week, then nothing. They had trained her to be the listener, the holder, the vessel for their pain, but they had never learned to hold hers. When she came to the rabbi, she was angry, betrayed. I gave them. 40 years, she said. And when I needed them, where were they? The rabbi's response was gentle but firm. You gave them 40 years of emergency room service. You trained them to come to you bleeding, get bandaged, and leave. You never taught them to care for you. How could they? You never gave them the chance. Dorothy started the 30-day practice, and it was hard. People at church noticed immediately. Are you okay? They'd ask, concerned. You seem distant. I'm learning to rest, she'd say. I'm learning to listen to God more and talk less. Some people got offended. Some accused her of being prideful, of thinking she was too good for them now. But others, a small number, maybe 4 or 5 people, they came closer. Real friends who had always been there but got lost in the crowd of feeders. These people didn't need Dorothy's pain to feel connected to her. They just wanted her company. 1 year later, Dorothy has a completely different life. Smaller, quieter, but infinitely more peaceful. I lost about 30 people I thought were friends, she told me last month, but I gained 5 people I would trust with my life, and I gained myself back. That emptiness I felt for 40 years, it's gone, because I'm not pouring myself out anymore. That's the trade. Quantity for quality. Popularity for peace. The appearance of intimacy for the reality of it. You need to decide, do you want 100 people who know your struggles, or 3 people who would carry them? For you, because you can't have both. The practice of guarding your mouth, of protecting your sacred information, will naturally filter your relationships. The feeders will leave. The real ones will stay. And yes, it will feel lonely at first, because we've been trained to measure love by how many people ask about us, but the ancient sages knew better. They measured love by who shows up without being asked, who protects without being told, who stays when there's nothing to gain. Here's what I want you to do starting today. The next time someone asks, how are you? And I mean within the next few hours, because someone will, I want you to pause. Just 1 second. And instead of automatically spilling your heart, I want you to say, thank God for each day. Just that. Notice how it feels. Notice if you feel the urge to say more. Notice the slight discomfort of not over-explaining. That discomfort, that's your old pattern resisting. That's decades of training trying to maintain itself. Push through it, because every time you guard your words, you're doing something revolutionary. You're taking back power you didn't even know you'd given away. You're closing openings you didn't know you'd created. You're becoming a vessel that holds blessing instead of leaking it. The Talmud teaches that when the temple was destroyed, the gates of prayer were closed, but the gates of tears were never closed, meaning you can always cry to God. You can always pour your heart out to the Creator. That channel is always open. But human beings, they're not God. They don't deserve unlimited access to your soul. They need to earn it, through time, through consistency, through proven faithfulness. And until they prove themselves, you have a responsibility, not just to yourself but to the divine spark within you, to guard what is holy. If you need prayer, drop your name below. No explanation needed, no story required, just your name. I'll see it, and I'll pray. And if this teaching has opened your eyes to something you've been doing for years without realizing it, please subscribe. Because next time I'm going to teach you how to recognize the signs that someone has been using spiritual manipulation, not just emotional feeding, but actual spiritual attack through words. You need to know this. Your life is not a public buffet where anyone can take what they want. Your struggles are not entertainment for people who are bored with their own lives. Your pain is not currency to purchase. Shallow connection. You are a temple, and temples have gates. Gates that open for the worthy and close to protect what is holy. For 67 years I left my gates wide open. I let anyone walk in, take what they wanted, and leave. I thought that was kindness. I thought that was love. But the Torah taught me differently. Real love protects. Real kindness has boundaries. Real holiness requires guards. I'm not telling you to become cold. I'm not telling you to trust no one. I'm telling you to become wise. To learn the difference between people who want to know you and people who want to use you. To understand that silence is sometimes the most powerful prayer you can offer. Because when you stop wasting your words on the unworthy, you finally have energy for the people who matter. When you stop draining yourself through 1,000 shallow connections, you can finally build deep roots with the few who are real. Rabbi Goldstein is 85 now. He still studies 16 hours a day. And you know what he told me last week? I've had 10,000 students over my lifetime, but I have 3 friends, 3 people I would tell my deepest fears to, 3 people who have earned access to my soul, and that, my daughter, is wealth beyond measure. 3 friends in 85 years, not because he's cold, not because he doesn't love people, but because he understands what most of us forget. Intimacy is not given freely, it's earned slowly, and it's protected fiercely. Guard your mouth, guard your peace, guard your soul. Not everyone who asks deserves an answer. Not everyone who seems to care actually does. Not everyone who wants to know should be told. You'll know who the real ones are, not by what they ask, but by what they do. Not by how much they want to know about your pain, but by how quickly they show up to ease it. Trust that discernment. It's not paranoia. It's ancient wisdom trying to protect you. And when you finally learn to guard your words the way you guard your life, you'll discover something beautiful. Silence isn't emptiness. It's fullness. It's power held close instead of scattered everywhere. It's strength that doesn't need to prove itself through confession. The world will call you closed. Let them. The feeders will call you cold. Let them. The broken vessels will say you've changed. Let them. Because you'll know the truth. You haven't become less loving. You've become more wise. And wisdom, my friend, is the greatest protection you'll ever have. Shalom, my friend. Until next time.